"Hello?" Mom said. "You'll never be anything without us," and slammed the door. I just said, "We'll see," and left. A month later they won't stop calling me after they found out. That was the last thing my mother screamed at me, her face twisted in a mix of rage and something else, something nastier. Satisfaction, maybe? She said it like she wanted it to be true. Like she needed it to be. Then she slammed the door in my face. I just stood there on the porch, breathing. Calm. My duffel bag felt heavier than it was. Inside were 3 t-shirts, a pair of jeans, a toothbrush, and whatever scraps of dignity I had left. I looked at the chipped paint on the railing, the porch light flickering weakly above me, and I whispered, "We'll see." Then I walked away from the only home I'd ever known. No car, no job lined up, no backup plan, just the sudden, weightless kind of freedom you feel when you've got absolutely nothing left to lose. Growing up in that house, there was always a tension, like something was buzzing just beneath the walls. At first, I thought it was normal. Parents argued. Siblings bickered. But as I got older, I realized something was off. Really off. My mom had a way of turning every good thing into a guilt trip. Every small mistake was a character flaw. And every success I had was somehow because of them, never because of me. "You'd be nothing without this family," she'd say. "We built you. Don't you forget that." And I didn't. Not for a long time. But something in me cracked that night. The screaming, the accusations, the emotional tug-of-war, it just didn't work anymore. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was done. What they didn't know, what I didn't even know at the time, was that walking away would be the first step toward a life they said I could never have. A month later they'd be the ones calling me. And not just to apologize, but to beg. The first few nights were rough. I crashed on my buddy Tyler's floor. He had a tiny studio above a laundromat that always smelled like detergent and burnt popcorn. No couch, just an old yoga mat and a fleece blanket that didn't quite reach the edges of my body. He offered it without hesitation. Said, "Stay as long as you need." I told him it'd only be a few days. It ended up being 3 weeks. I picked up work wherever I could, moving furniture, dishwashing, doing inventory for a thrift shop that paid under the table. I ate ramen, stretched quarters into meals, and used the laundromat below for warmth more than anything else. There were nights I couldn't sleep, not from noise, but from the crushing weight of what now? And yet I didn't regret leaving. Not for a second. Because even in all that struggle, I felt something new, clarity. The weird part? I almost expected my family to reach out. A text. "Where are you?" Something. But days turned into weeks, and the silence just confirmed what I'd always suspected. They didn't care about me. They cared about control. Then one afternoon, everything changed. Tyler and I were eating cheap tacos from the place across the street when I got the call. A number I didn't recognize. New York area code. I almost didn't pick up. But something told me to. "Is this Daniel Myers?" the voice asked. "Yeah, who's this?" "My name's Paul Linden. I'm an attorney handling the estate of your grandfather, William Myers. I believe we need to talk." I blinked. "My grandfather passed over a decade ago." "No," the man said gently. "That was your mother's father. I represent your father's estranged father. William passed away last week. He left behind a will, and you're the primary beneficiary." I sat there, the taco halfway to my mouth, completely frozen. Tyler paused, looking at me like I'd seen a ghost. "Wait, what does that mean?" I asked. "It means," Paul said, "you've inherited his home, his savings account, and a few other assets. He left a letter for you, personally. He said he always saw something in you. Something the rest of your family chose not to." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because in that moment, everything tilted. I wasn't just the black sheep anymore. I was the one who got out. The house was nothing like I imagined. It sat on a quiet street in upstate New York, tucked between 2 massive oak trees, the kind with gnarled branches that seemed to whisper secrets when the wind blew just right. The paint was faded, the gutters sagged a little, but it stood solid, unshaken. Just like the man who once lived there. I hadn't known much about my grandfather William. My dad rarely spoke about him, and my mom acted like he didn't exist. All I knew was that there was bad blood. That's the phrase they used, like it was some mysterious feud that couldn't be explained. Turns out, the only bad blood was their resentment. When I walked into the house with the lawyer's key, I was overwhelmed. Not by the size, it was modest, but by the stillness. Everything was left just as he had it. A couple mugs in the dish rack. A book open on the coffee table. A throw blanket folded neatly over the arm of a recliner. And on the dining table, in a manila envelope, was the letter. It was written in slow, shaky cursive. But the words were steady. Strong. Daniel. I always knew they didn't treat you right. I saw it the few times I tried to come around. Your mother barely looked me in the eye. Your father acted like I was a ghost. But you looked at me like I mattered. I know we didn't get much time, but I watched from a distance. I saw your graduation announcement in the paper. Heard from an old friend that you were working 2 jobs while your siblings coasted. I never interfered. Maybe that was my mistake. But now I want to give you what no one else in our family ever gave me, a chance. Use this house. Use what I left you. Build the life they said you never could. And when they come calling, and they will, remember this. You never needed them. Love. William. I sat there for a long time after reading it. Staring at the words. Rereading the lines that felt like a balm on a lifetime of wounds. For once, someone in my bloodline saw me for me. It wasn't just an inheritance. It was permission to start over. And that's when the calls started. At first, it was just 1. Then 2. Then a cascade. My mother. My sister. Even my father. I didn't answer a single one. Not yet. By the end of the week, my voicemail was full. Daniel, it's your mother. Call me back. Please. Danny, we heard about something with a house. We need to talk. Son, this is your father. I know you're upset, but don't be stupid. I sat on the back porch of my grandfather's house, watching the sun sink behind the tree line. There was a slight chill in the air, and I wrapped myself tighter in the old flannel blanket I'd found in the upstairs closet. It still smelled like cedar and pipe tobacco. The thing is, I wasn't upset. I was done. Done begging for scraps of affection. Done financing their lives while mine barely held together. Done pretending like I mattered to people who only saw me as a backup plan. And now, suddenly, they were calling? Not when I was sleeping on Tyler's floor. Not when I couldn't afford to buy groceries. But when I came into something? I didn't need to hear their voices to know what they'd say. Oh, we always believed in you. See? We knew you'd turn things around. Can we come visit? It'd be so nice to reconnect. The nerve of it. But instead of blocking them, I came up with something else. A plan. Not cruel. Just honest. I started fixing up the house. My grandfather had kept it in great shape, but I wanted it to feel like mine. I refinished the kitchen cabinets, painted the walls, even built a desk in the study where I started sketching out ideas for the business I'd always dreamed of, a home renovation company for people like me. Ones who came from nothing and wanted to build something real. I used a chunk of the inheritance to get it started, registered the LLC, bought tools, and hired a few guys from town who knew the meaning of hard work. People like Tyler, who'd shown up when no one else had. Every day, the calls came. And every day, I let them ring. Until one day I answered. Mom, I said, voice flat. Oh, Daniel. Thank God. We've been worried sick. I'm fine. Silence. We heard about your grandfather. I didn't know you two were close. I didn't respond. Well, she continued, trying to keep her tone light. Your sister and I were thinking, it might be nice to get together. Reconnect. We could come up and see the house, maybe grab dinner? That's when the idea came together completely. A dinner. Sure. Let them come. Let them see what I'd built without them. And then, let them hear the truth. I waited 3 days before I sent the text. Hey. I've been thinking. Maybe you're right, it's time we talked. Let's do dinner. My treat. Saturday night. I'll send you the address. I kept it vague on purpose. Just enough warmth to give them hope, but not enough to suggest they'd earned anything. I didn't mention the inheritance. Didn't bring up the house. Definitely didn't say anything about the business. I just watched the dots bubble on my screen and, sure enough, within minutes my mother replied. We're so glad you're coming around. This means a lot to the family. Family? Funny word. I sent them the address, the one they didn't recognize because none of them had ever been to my grandfather's place. I imagined their confusion, maybe a little suspicion. But they didn't question it. Pride wouldn't let them. They assumed they were being summoned back into my life, back into their roles as the all-knowing, all-giving matriarch and patriarch of the Myers clan. They had no idea. Saturday arrived like a slow drumbeat. I set the table in the dining room just like my grandfather used to when I visited as a kid, nothing flashy, just solid wood, clean silverware, folded cloth napkins. I even lit a candle in the center. Just for mood. Then I changed. Not into anything expensive, no designer suits or watches. That wasn't me. I wore jeans, boots, and a fitted black button-down. Clean. Sharp. Comfortable. The front doorbell rang at exactly 6:02 p.m. When I opened it, my mother gasped. "Oh, Daniel," she said, stepping inside. "This place is beautiful." My father followed, nodding in silent approval, and my sister trailed behind them with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. They looked around, absorbing the details: the polished hardwood floors, the brushed nickel fixtures, the quiet luxury of a home built with intention. "You live here?" my father asked, eyeing the staircase. I nodded. "I do." "You rent?" my sister chimed, casually nosing her way through the entryway. I didn't answer. Just gestured toward the dining room. "Dinner's ready." They sat, still playing their parts, the reformed parents, the curious sibling. I let them settle in. I let them talk. My mom brought up old memories, my dad made offhand comments about how far I've come, and my sister dropped little barbs about how she'd always seen potential in me. And I let them. I waited until the moment was just right, the table full of food, wine poured, their masks starting to slip. Then I stood. And I said, "I'm glad you came. There's something I wanted to tell you. Something I've been waiting to say for a long time." Their smiles froze. And I smiled right back. Because this wasn't just dinner. It was the beginning of the end. I leaned forward, resting my hands lightly on the table. "This house," I began, voice calm, "didn't come from a job promotion. I didn't win the lottery. And no, I'm not renting." My mother blinked. "Then how?" "It was left to me," I said. "By Grandpa William." That name hung in the air like a ghost. My dad shifted in his seat. "Your grandfather?" He was estranged. He didn't even." "He did," I cut in. "He saw more in me than the rest of you ever did." My sister opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. "He left me this house. A sizable savings account. And a letter. A letter where he said he always knew the truth, that you never believed in me. That you all treated me like I was a burden." My mother's face twisted, unsure whether to cry or deny. I didn't stop. "I used that money to start my own business. This house is mine. That car outside? Mine. That company logo on the jackets in the entryway? Mine." I stepped back. "And I built it all, without you." Silence. For once, they had nothing to say. For a few seconds, no one moved. You could hear the tick of the old wall clock, louder than it had ever sounded before. Then my mother let out a brittle laugh, the kind you use when you're not sure whether to cry or fake composure. "Well, that's wonderful, sweetheart," she said, too sweet, too fast. "We're just happy you're doing well." My father scoffed under his breath. You mean you let that old man buy your success? I turned to him, slowly. No. I earned it. Grandpa just gave me what none of you ever did, a chance. You, on the other hand, gave me lectures. Guilt trips. Silence. You slammed a door in my face. My sister finally snapped. Okay, we get it. You've got money now, you've got a house. You think that makes you better than us? No, I said quietly. What makes me better is that I didn't use people. I didn't manipulate anyone. I didn't burn bridges and then show up with a matchbox asking for warmth. She scoffed, but her cheeks flushed. The cracks were showing now. Daniel, my mom said, her voice trembling just slightly. We are still your family. Families go through things. We weren't perfect, but we. You told me I was nothing without you. I cut in. You made sure I believed it. You needed me to stay small so you could feel big. You slammed the door in my face and called it love. She looked away. And now that I have something of my own, now that I'm not struggling, you come crawling back with forced smiles and empty praise. Not because you care, but because you think there's something in it for you. They didn't deny it. That was the part that hurt most. They didn't even try. I invited you here tonight, I said, straightening up, so you could see that you were wrong. Not just about me, but about the story you told yourselves. That I'd fail. That I'd come running back. I looked at each of them. I didn't. They sat in silence, their plates untouched, the food cooling between us like a truth no one wanted to swallow. I stood there, letting the silence do what my words couldn't, sink in. The same people who once dismissed me, belittled me, guilted me into submission, were now sitting in my house, eating my food, staring at a life they never believed I could build. And they hated it. Not because I was unkind, but because I had proven them wrong. My sister was the first to break. She shoved her chair back, arms crossed like she was 15 again. This is just sad, she snapped. You clearly haven't changed. Still bitter. Still holding grudges like a child. I tilted my head. You're right, I said. I am holding on to something. Clarity. She rolled her eyes and stormed toward the entryway, muttering something under her breath. My father stood next slowly, like he was still waiting for a cue. You think success erases disrespect? He said, voice low, measured. You think this makes you a man? I looked him dead in the eye. No. This makes me free. He didn't say another word. Just followed my sister out. And then it was just me and her. My mother sat still, hands folded in her lap, eyes darting across the table like she was trying to memorize the moment. Maybe she was. I loved you, she whispered. You may not believe it, but I did. No, I said gently. You loved the version of me you could control. The one who paid your bills. Took your insults. Stayed quiet. I'm not that person anymore. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't move. I'm not angry, I added. I'm just done. She stood, shaky, and gathered her coat from the back of the chair. This doesn't have to be goodbye. It does. She looked at me for a long moment, maybe waiting for a flicker of doubt, one last crack in the armor. But there wasn't one. She opened the door slowly. The wind caught it as she stepped out. No slammed door this time. Just a quiet click behind her. This time, I was the one who closed it. The house was silent again. But it was a different kind of silence now, clean, uncluttered, peaceful. The kind that settles over a place when something toxic finally leaves it. I walked back into the dining room and looked at the table, 3 untouched plates, candles still flickering, wine glasses barely sipped. They came expecting a handout. They left with the truth. I didn't feel triumphant. Not exactly. There was no movie-ending satisfaction, no slow clap echoing through the room. Just relief. A weight lifted. A knot I hadn't realized was tied around my chest finally loosened. That night I sat by the fireplace, my grandfather's old chair under me, a whiskey in my hand, and I thought about the strange, jagged path that led me here. A month ago, I was sleeping on a floor, eating canned soup, trying not to drown in the feeling that I was completely, utterly alone. Now, I had a home, a business, a future, and the ghost of a man I barely knew had done what no one else had, believed in me. The company took off quicker than I expected. Word spread fast in a small town. People liked that I treated them with respect, showed up on time, kept my promises, probably because I knew what it felt like to be constantly let down. Tyler came on full-time. We hired 2 more guys. Then 4. I started mentoring a couple of younger kids who reminded me of myself, quiet, overlooked, just waiting for someone to see them. We renovated kitchens and bathrooms, sure. But it felt like we were building something bigger than that. Every wall we painted, every foundation we repaired, it felt like I was healing something inside myself, too. My family? They stayed quiet after that night. For a while. But eventually the messages started again. Polite at first. Hope you're doing well. Then more pointed. We should really talk. Then the old tune returned. You think you're too good for us now? My sister even went as far as tagging me in some passive-aggressive post online about people, forgetting where they came from. Funny. I didn't forget. I remembered everything. Every insult disguised as advice. Every guilt trip wrapped in a smile. Every time they made me feel small just so they could feel bigger. And now? Now they had to sit with the fact that the person they once called worthless didn't just survive. He thrived. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be here, running my own business, living in a house I didn't even know was waiting for me, finally breathing without strings attached, I wouldn't have believed you. I spent most of my life being told I wasn't enough. That I was lazy, ungrateful, a burden. I believed it for a long time. Until I didn't. Walking away wasn't easy. Starting over with nothing wasn't easy. But staying? Staying in a place where you're only loved when you're useful, that's worse. Bye-bye.